The Defence Acquisition Council, or the DAC, which is headed by Defence Minister Shri Rajnath Singh, is expected to pave the final way for the acquisition of 26 Rafale-Ms, or the Rafale marine aircraft, soon. Now, these aircraft are picked over Boeing's FA-18 Super Hornet. These fighters are manufactured by Dassault Aviation, which is a French company, and will be purchased for India's aircraft carrier, the INS Vikrant. Now, priced at an estimated 6 billion euros, Rafale-Ms are important for India's ongoing naval modernization and enhancing strike capabilities. It should be noted that India has a second aircraft carrier as well, the INS Vikramaditya, which is customized to fly the aging MiG-29s. Now, these MiGs are to be upgraded, most likely by an Indian company. In such a situation, the acquisition of fighters for INS Vikrant is absolutely crucial because one of them has to work, right? The DAC is also brainstorming on approving the construction of at least half a dozen or more stealth frigates and has recently cleared 3 additional Kalbari-class submarines. Navy modernization is also set to get a boost from the 31 MQ-9B Predator drones from the US. Now, all these DAC clearances are given keeping in mind the tilting balance of power toward China's Navy and its aggressive activities in the Indian Ocean region as well as in the larger Indo-Pacific. But the procurement of defense equipment is a rather convoluted process. Why do I say so? Because it has to meet certain conditions, and one of which is a higher indigenized content or content that is locally manufactured in India. Now, although this is an ideal objective, in reality, it often delays the procurement process. Now, let's see how the indigenized content condition has fared in the procurement of the Rafale Marines. Now, the Rafale Marines deal has been under negotiation for a year. And there have been a few factors which have delayed this particular deal. Now, the most basic is cost, which India has understandably been trying to keep as low as possible. But there's also another factor, and this other factor has been the Indian preference for integrating at least 2 types of indigenous equipment on the Rafale marine aircraft. Now, the first is an indigenously built radar system, and the second are indigenously built missile systems. Now, let me tell you about the radar system first, and then we come to the missile system. India prefers that its Rafale Marines come with Uttam, an active electronically scanned array, or the AESA radar, indigenously developed by Electronics Research and Development Establishment, which is a subordinate laboratory of the DRDO. Now, the original Rafale-Ms also come with an AESA radar, but those are developed by Thales. Rafale is also the only European combat aircraft, by the way, to use an electronic scanning radar. Actually, AESA brings superior detection and tracking range along with high resolution, and it also allows very low altitude flying above uncharted terrain in autopilot coupled nodes in bind conditions, or basically in simple language, the AESA radars have superior detection. Now, the DRDO has been developing its own version of AESA radars and has called it Uttam. This kind of radar's basic design had only about 784 transmit and receive modules, or TR modules. In later course corrections, the advanced designs were upgraded to having at least 968 TR modules, which would ensure better resolution and power consumption. By the way, these advanced Uttam radars are also being developed for India's Tejas Mk1 fighter. I'm sure you've heard about that. Now, it is possible that DRDO develops an even more advanced version of Uttam with an even higher TR module in the future. See, the thing is that these technologies will evolve. The bottom line to remember is that with a rapidly evolving design and plans to be integrated with other, indigenously designed aircrafts, it actually makes a lot of sense for India to push for integrating the Uttam AESA radars with Rafale-Ms instead of the ones developed by Thales. So in terms of logic, there is perfect logic. However, as was evident in the last 1 year, the integration was proving to be more expensive and caused delays in the project as well. Therefore, the Indian side seems to have dropped that specification from the final discussions. Now, let's discuss the second aspect, which is about the missiles. The second demand by the Indian side has been to integrate the Rafale-Ms with Astra missiles. These fall in the category of Beyond Visual Range BVR air-to-air missiles and have been indigenously designed by DRDO as well. Now, the story of the development of the Astra missiles has been fascinating to say the least. Considered technologically and economically superior to many of their Western counterparts, the Astra Mark 1, 2 and 3 show India's successful run with potent missiles and their state-of-the-art technology. You know, India for decades has been dependent on first Soviet and then Russian missiles, but that's not the case anymore. Now, initially, the basic BVRMs, the Astra Mark 1, had a solid fuel rocket engine, which was upgraded to a better range with Astra Mark 2 solid fuel engine with a dual pulse. The latter has been instrumental in expanding the range of these missiles. However, DRDO's research team topped its game with the development of Astra Mark III with a phenomenal range of 350 km with what is called a solid fuel ducted ramjet or the SFDR propulsion engine. Now, this has enabled the Astra missile to intercept aerial threats over a far greater distance at supersonic speed. Now, this technology advancement also reflects the concomitant advancement in communication systems that are now completely digitalized. Now, I'll give you an example. DRDO has installed a network-centric software-defined radio system in Astras, which has made its target locking and destruction much more lethal and precise. Actually, what happens is that software-defined network allows for the missiles to be launched from a different aircraft and tracking can be carried out by another one, which is quite impressive. Therefore, it is quite natural that India would want these indigenously developed advanced Astra missiles to be installed with the Rafale-Ms as well. So, the good news is Rafale-Ms are to be installed with Astras. But the not so good news is the radar system will continue to be from Thales and not Uttam. So, let's revisit some gaping gaps in our defense industry ecosystem. You know, despite the phenomenal progress in many areas, the most vulnerable situation for India right now is achieving self-reliance in jet engine technology. We still lack a world-class jet engine with 100 kN thrust, even when we have taken a leap forward for aero engine capabilities. You know, India has a roadmap to develop the Kaveri 2 engine with a 90 to 95 kN thrust. Now, this would also be a potential substitute for the current GE404 engines for platforms like the Tejas Mk1. However, for now, the golden dream of attaining self-reliance in these niche technologies has an arduous pathway with many a lag and a snag. It's a story for another day and I will come to that. But for now, let me return to the Rafale-Ms. The problem that we see is not all domestic. Internationally, there is a situation of supply chain delays as well. You know, France is the second largest weapons exporter in the world. In fact, even for New Delhi, now we import 33% of our weapons from Paris. Traditional supplier Russia is, relatively speaking, a diminishing actor in India's defense procurement with an edge of only 3% more than France, which means that France is giving us 33% of our weapons while Russia is giving us 36% of the weapons. Now, in the case of Russia, the situation is very clear, which is that it is facing a lot of pressure with the war in Ukraine, and this particular war is stretching on. Now, considering that India has not placed a fresh important order with Russia in the aftermath of the Ukraine war, Paris's share of New Delhi's imports will keep rising in the next few years as well. Now, what is the point which is to be noted? In such a scenario, it is important to highlight how the French defense industries are coping with delayed deliveries due to their own disruptions in supply chains. I'll give you the specific example of Dassault. In the case of Dassault, it has deliveries schedules to meet in several parts of the world. As a result of persistent supply chain problems, there's been a backlog of more than 200 Dassault aircraft to be exported as well as delivered for domestic use. It may be noted that the Rafale jet was originally developed to replace 7 different types of combat aircraft for the French military. While extremely successful both at home and abroad, Dassault Aviation remains heavily dependent on supply chains that are not totally immune to global disruptions. Now, Rafales are already being used by air forces of Egypt, Qatar, Croatia, Indonesia, the United Arab Emirates, Greece, and India. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has also pushed up defense modernization drive, making the traditional European companies, which were earlier focused only on exports, now also they have to cater to surging domestic demands. Now, the drive to raise the defense equipment across all NATO countries to ensure what is called as interoperability and NATO standard has surged as the Soviet-era weapons held by mostly Central and East European countries have been donated to Ukraine against Russia. And this is true of Czech Republic, Poland, etc. Now, delivering NATO standard weapons has resulted in an unprecedented strain on US defense manufacturers that cannot really keep pace. It has created a boon and a bane kind of a situation for European manufacturers that can step up for closing capability gaps. But the problem is that maintaining pressing domestic requirements along with expanding international orders is not an easy feat to achieve, especially when all major defense manufacturers across the Western spectrum are facing similar supply chain delays and certification issues. Now, having said that, I would agree that the overall situation has now improved in France due to the government's strategy to promote military exports. Macron's government has done a lot of work there. However, the impact of global ambivalence is seen and felt in military-industrial complex circles, and it is here to stay. India's defense equipment procurement pathways are changing very fast. I will be back to discuss how our Ministry of Defense is planning to achieve this balance between self-reliance on the one hand and foreign imports on the other, because let's not forget, time is a crucial vector here. Stay tuned.